So in this video, I want to look at two photos and see how a beginner, an intermediate and a pro level photographer might edit them.
A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So I've got two images here and I thought it'd be really interesting because there's different types of edits that you can do on these two images, all valid, all good, but I think at those different levels, I think different features of the images come out and I wanted to show you in this video. It's a video I've been meaning to do for years, never got around to it. Thought it'd be a good time to do it now. Right, first one is this image. I'm going to look at the beginner for both of them, and then we'll go into the intermediate for both of them, etc. So this is an image that I took in the snow near where I live of these trees that quite often are nondescript, and I hadn't spotted them before, but the snow brought it out. And the thing about this was the light was amazing. So as a beginner, when you're into Lightroom, the first thing that you do is obviously you go and have a look at cropping it. So what we'll do here is we'll maybe get rid of that on the outside a little bit, and maybe we'll make the trees in the middle. And then maybe actually we might even crop the top a little bit. So we've got an image here now that we can change the exposure of, and I'm going to go down, and this is a good for every level really, but I'm going to go down from the top to the bottom. At the moment it says camera standard 2, which is my camera profile, which is totally fine, doesn't really matter what you start with there. I'm going to add some contrast, I'm going to maybe reduce the highlights, and I'm going to increase the shadows, increase the whites, what you do on most photos really, and I'll maybe make it a bit darker because that seems, as I'm doing that, I'm thinking, okay, well that makes it a bit bluer, which I think looks pretty good. And then I'll add some saturation. So there's a few things there that I've on purpose done, not wrong, but not how I would do them as an intermediate, and I'll come back to them. And I think, okay, that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll brighten it up a little bit more. And I'm actually quite pleased with that. I think that looks pretty good. And that's probably it for the beginner edit, really. You know, you go away, you think, I've done something pretty good there. I've gone from that to that. It looks fairly decent. So on this image here, again, we'll go through the same process, the edit. You know, again, I'm thinking about the crop. I mean, to be honest, the photographer, me, did a pretty good job of the crop, which is very unusual in field. One thing I would always check, again, at every level should do this, is just the horizon, so I can see that that horizon is pretty straight, I think. It's difficult to see the horizon here, so I'm just judging it on there, and that's pretty good, that horizon. And then I go and maybe increase the exposure a bit. I would probably want to make it a bit warmer, add some contrast, reduce the highlights, increase the shadows, and already that looks fantastic, doesn't it? You know, it's looking pretty good. And then increase the whites a little bit, and maybe I might even add a little bit of vibrance. And again, as a beginner, I've done that, and it's a pretty decent edit. You know, it's brought out the oomph in the image, it stands out, and it looks pretty good, and I'd be pretty happy with it. With both of these two images though, there's definitely things that you can significantly improve by just going and delving in a little bit deeper. And that's where the intermediate comes in. So that, you know, somebody who's probably been doing photography for maybe a year or two, has understood a little bit more in Lightroom, and you're starting to think about things in a different way. So as an intermediate photographer, maybe you look at this and you'll think, is that tree adding anything? You know, the photographer messed up here really, me, sorry. What he should have done is just photograph this tree. So you go along and you think, okay, well, I want to crop out that branch, but the tree looks like it's moving that way. We'll crop it down a little bit, and we've got this nice crop here. And I think that looks pretty good. So I've got a better starting point. It's a more interesting photo to edit. And then I know as an intermediate that temperature has a big impact on this. Now I don't want to warm it up. That's probably the true color of it, if I'm honest. So yeah, I might want to make it even bluer by cooling it down a little bit. And then I'm going to add some more contrast. But the main thing I'm thinking is there a way I can pull this tree out a little bit more? So the way of doing that is a radial filter. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to add a radial filter into the middle here. And I am going to just increase the exposure a little bit of it, just to bring your attention a little bit more to this tree. And I'm getting quite excited now because this is looking quite a lot better. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now, the other thing I do as an intermediate is I've started to use the HSL slider. And this is a slider that allows you to target the hue, saturation, and color of individual colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the blue maybe and just mess with that. Well, already that makes a big difference. And I've got to make a decision now. Do I want it bluer or not? Well, maybe I do. So I'm just going to add a little bit more blue saturation. And then I'll maybe just play with the hue of that. Well, I don't want it sort of greeny. I think if anything, it probably looks a bit better towards the purpley bluey end. So we'll maybe go for that. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. The only thing I want to add then is maybe add a vignette onto it. So I could go and do that in many different ways. But what I'll do is I'll just do it the lazy way. And I'll just add a slight vignette in it here. So that is a pretty good intermediate edit, I think. You know, again, we've gone from that to that. Obviously, we've cropped it quite significantly as well. So I've started to use some more tools. I've started to think about the feel of the image a little bit more. And I've started to do things a little bit differently. What on earth can the advanced person do? Advanced pro, I don't know what you call them. Somebody that's been doing it for longer is probably the best way of saying it. Anyway, let's get on to this one. And what would the intermediate person do on this one? Well, again, color temperature is good. And this is a really important point, this. Color temperature, if you watch the color temperature, if I go all the way to warm, everything's going warm. I'm warming up the whole image, all the colors in the image. What you've got to do when you're warming up all the colors is remember that that might not be right. So, and it isn't right, is it? And you're going to lose some color information if you do that. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to cool it down because I feel like this is bringing out more tonality in the clouds a little bit. This is probably a more truer color when it's cooled down a little bit. So I might even go a little bit further because I can bring those colors back in different areas then. And that's the thing really that you realize after a year or so of doing Lightroom is it's all about individual targeting of colors and luminance that makes such a big difference. So here, maybe what I might do is I might brighten up this a little bit more. Now I could just go and add the shadows, which again I might have done as a beginner, but now I'm thinking, I know I can do a little bit more here because I don't really want to bring this shadow up here because that's altering this contrast. So what I can do is I can add some sort of filter on there or just brush it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a radial filter on this, do it really simple, and I'm just going to add the shadows up on that a little bit, and that looks pretty good. Then the other thing is I want to sort the sky out. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to add a linear gradient on this sky, and I'm pretty clever. I'm going to intersect it with the sky. So I'm going to click the Option key on the Mac, intersect, select sky. Now what it's done is it's now just selecting the sky. So I've got a nice linear gradient down and the sky. You can do it the other way around as well, and that's looking pretty good. And then what I can do, and I think a really good thing to do here, and I quite often do this on my skies, is just add a little bit of dehaze. You don't want to overdo this, but I just want to bring out a darker cloud a little bit. And I'm going to add some clarity, and then I'm also going to darken it a tad as well. So that's looking pretty good. So again, we've gone from this to this. It's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. The other thing is, though, I want to check that the camera profile is being set. Now, in this case, when I enable profile corrections, what it does is it checks the distortion of the lens and it corrects it. But I know that on my camera, it doesn't change anything. It does that when it takes the photo, it's built in. But I'm just going to check that manually because I don't want this horizon to be curved. So I'm just going to have a mess about with this. And it may be, I just need to go to about there to get that right. And then I'm just going to go and check the level again by just going on here and just checking that level. It's probably right, but yeah, it's slightly out, but not very much. So I've just confirmed that. That's all good. I'm going to dial down that vibrance that we put in because I just don't think we need that. We can do that in different ways. And I think that's good. The only thing I'm thinking now is maybe we could just increase the saturation of this area here. But by and large, it's pretty good, I think. So that's my intermediate edit. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's pretty good. I think I've done a good job of it. Now we get onto the advanced. So Pro. We'll call it Pro. It sounds better. So we're going to get onto the advanced. So what can I possibly do different with that? Well, I think there's a few things. Now this is where it becomes into artist interpretation, I think, a little bit, this. But I remember when I was editing this, I thought that this branch here was reaching into the sky. So actually, it's good to have some more sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that out and add some more sky in. But obviously when I do that, I'm going to introduce this here. Now what you can do is you can go into Photoshop and get rid of it. I'm going to quickly get rid of it in Lightroom. Now obviously if I had more time, then I would definitely go into Photoshop and do this because it will do a better job of it. But I'm just going to get rid of that. And then also this branch down here, I think it's a bit distracting. And any distractions, that's one thing I spend a lot of time doing on my photos. Any distractions I want to get rid of. And I feel like that's a better balance to the image. So, you know, it's like the pro crop, I suppose. It's just thinking a little bit more about the feeling of the image, what you're trying to convey with the image. This is called prima. This was what this image was called in the end. And I sort of thought about a prima ballerina sort of reaching up to the sky. So now I think what I want to do is I want to bring out the whites more in the ends. I want to tone it a little bit differently. And I want to think about what I can do with this bark because I think I can maybe darken it a little bit. So let's darken the bark first. So what I might do is I might create a luminance range and just click on this dark bit of the bark here. And then on that, I might just darken that down a little bit. But I don't want to darken the background, don't want to darken all these other bits of branches. So I'm going to intersect it with a brush on a low flow. Wherever I brush now, it will only apply that change. And I'm just going to reduce that a little bit in size. And now I'm just going to brush on this branch up here. And all it's going to do is going to apply that darkness just to that branch. I don't want the one behind it because I want to create a little bit of depth feeling to this image. Then the other thing is that I want to bring out this glow up here. So there's a few ways I can do that. I think I'm just going to do it with a radial filter and just have it around about there. And I'm going to just dehaze that. So again, I'm just thinking about the feeling I want. I want it reaching up to a glowy bit. And I'm just going to dehaze that a little bit and probably add some whites. Now, when I'm doing that, I don't want it to be doing it to the darker colors. So I don't want it to be doing it to this dark tree here or the dark branch here because I think that looks a bit odd. It doesn't look right. So what I'm going to do with that radial gradient is that I just want the lighter tone. So I'm going to intersect it with a luminance range, and I'm just going to intersect it with just the brighter colors. So I'm just going to go to the brighter colors there and then feather it. So I really want to have a big feather on it. Yeah, so the whites was probably not the way to do it there. So I'm just going to go back to the exposure and just change that a little bit. And then I'm going to add some contrast in there as well. Yeah, I think that's not far off. I could make that just a bit bluer as well, I think. No, I think that's probably about right. So I definitely want to make these whites on this branch whiter. I think the easiest way to do that is just go back to this radial filter here and then just add a little bit more in the white. Just push that a little bit more. And the only final thing really on this from an advanced point of view is actually tonality of the colors. And I think I can do that with a curve. So what I can do is I can go to the blue curve here. And obviously if I move this up, I'm going to make any highlights bluer. If I move it down, I'm going to make them yellower. And here I'm going to make the shadows bluer and yellower. I want the highlights to be bluer. So I'm just going to push that up slightly like that. And that just makes it pop. I think that's it. I don't think there's much else apart from one thing. The final thing is the blue primer here. So the calibration, this is basically how each pixel is made up. And they're obviously made up. Every pixel is made up of a red, a green, and a blue pixel. I can get to that primary pixel, that blue pixel, and change the saturation of it. And I feel like just by doing that, I'm just going to create a little bit more of a blue look to that image. I think that's pretty good. I really like that. And there's one final thing I'm going to do to it when I've gone to the other image. So We'll go back to this image and we'll do the final changes on this. And again, it's usually around color and tonality, but there's one thing I want to do here, and that's add a radial filter here. But this is a little bit special, this radial filter. So similar to what I just did before, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna create a radial filter. I'm gonna add it here. And what I want to do is I want to just go and I've got a video all about adding radial filters to do this. I'll link it here. But I'm going to reduce the dehaze to create a bit of a glow, and then I'm going to tone that warmer. So I'm going to increase the temperature of it, and I'm just going to change the color of that. So you can tone this to anything you want. I mean, obviously that looks awful, but I'm just going to tone it and make it a little bit warmer. So about there. But what you can see when I've done this is, if I do a before and after, you can see it's really altered this rock here. I don't want that rock altered at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to remove that rock from it. Now the easiest way to do that is just subtract color or luminance range, but I'm going to go for luminance range, and I'm just going to pick on a dark color there, and that's going to subtract that from it. And you can see that straight away now we have not got that rock, we've just got the background lighter tones in. But that's overdone it. So what I'm now going to do, and this is why this is a little bit more advanced, is I've now got to go and just add in a brush basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add brush, and I'm going to go and just make sure it's not a low flow, and I'm just going to brush that back in, and that just basically just brushes back in that glow there. You know, you might just want to do it just a little bit, and that now is quite good. I've just got a little bit of the glow coming on the rock. And I quite often spend quite a lot of time just tweaking things like that. Now, the other thing that I'm not 100% sure about this is I think the sky should be a little bit darker, so I would add another radial gradient to this here. Not radial, a linear gradient to it, and I'm just going to darken that down a little bit more, just to pull your eye more in here. And then the other thing is that I feel like this can have a lot, just a different color really. And the way to do this, and this is a new thing in Lightroom, is to use point color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all just do a linear gradient, so I'm only affecting the bottom of the image. And then on that I'm going to go down and click point color, click the green. And now what I can do is I can alter this green, but it's not going to alter any of the sort of yellowy greens up here as well. So I can change the hue, and you can see that that's just changing it on here. It's not changing it up here. So I actually want to make this a little bit greener, and I want to increase the luminance of it a little bit just to make it pop. And maybe just a tiny bit more saturated. And then the final thing is I just want to now just reduce the clarity of that a little bit, because I want to make it just a little bit more glowy. And then final thing before I go on to the final thing for both images is this bit here. I would probably go and brush on some clarity onto that. So to do that, I'll probably increase the contrast, increase the exposure, blacks, and we'll go down here and we'll add some clarity, and I'm just going to brush that onto that. Now you probably should use a slightly smaller brush than that, but this is very minimal. You can see I've just made that pop a little bit more, and actually now looking at it, it probably needs to be a bit warmer as well. So I'm just going to warm that up. And you can see that I'm building up areas of the images, different color balances, different areas of luminosity, different contrast, to try and bring depth to the image, to bring emotion to the image, to bring mood to the image. All those things make such a big difference when you get to that sort of next level. And I play with this for a long time. You know, sometimes I come back to it over days and days and days and keep tweaking it. The other thing, the final thing is I go around and just, you know, just clean it up. So get rid of anything that I think is not right. So the final thing that I quite often do with my images, and these are two really good images for this, is I'll go and I'll open the image. I'll go here and I'll open the image, edit in Photoshop. I've got a beta version of Photoshop I'm using at the moment, just because I like to see what all the new tools are. So what I do is when I get it in Photoshop, I create a duplicate layer and just do a Gaussian blur on it. I'll link a description to a video I've done on this before. So I'm just going to add a background layer on it. On that background layer, I'm just going to add Gaussian blur. And you do it around about 45, depending on the megapixels of your camera, but I'll link a video on here on how to do that. And then I'll just reduce the opacity of it to maybe about, we'll start at 16%. And then I'm just going to mess about with these different overlays. I usually use lighten, screen, overlay or soft light, and I think overlay looks pretty good on this, but I feel like it's affecting the darks too much. So what I'd do then is I'd just add a curve on top of that, but only allow that curve to impact that very top layer, which is the Gaussian layer. And I just make it very contrasty like this. So it's just impacting the highlights more. And then go back to this and probably reduce the opacity. So now we've gone from that to that. I probably, when I got that back in Lightroom, is tweak it a little bit more because I feel like it's gone a little bit too blue and a little bit too dark on the bark. So, you know, it's a bit of a round robin trip really. Obviously I can make those tweaks in Photoshop, but I like to do most of my tweaks in Lightroom. And then the same with this one as well. So I can right click, edit in, open in Photoshop, do exactly the same thing. And then I'm just going to reduce the opacity. And then on this one, I think screen's going to look pretty good. And again, it's just trial and error that. I'm going to add a curve on this again because I just want it to mostly affect the highlights. And obviously I just want to affect the Gaussian blur layer. So again, I've gone from that to that just to add a little bit of a glow. Too much, I've done way too much there because that's up 20%. So I'll probably go down to about 12%. And again, subtlety is really important. That's it. That's the change from one to the other, and it's super simple to do. I hope you found that useful. Before I go, I just want to thank Squarespace, who are the sponsor of this week's video. Squarespace are a fantastic platform, as you know, to create your own website. I talk about them a lot because one, they sponsor my channel and they've really supported this channel for years and years and years now. But more importantly, I just love them. Without them, I couldn't run my business. It's super, super simple, whether you want to set up your just website to share your images, where you've got control of your images. You don't have to worry about compression by Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. Or you might want to start a shop where you sell photos from your local area, or you sell workshops that you're starting to run. Anyway, give Squarespace a look. You can get a free trial, and also if you're ready to go ahead with it, you can get 10% off with the offer code Nigel, or use squarespace.com/Nigel. I hope that's been helpful. If it has, let me know in the comments. Also let me know your tips for doing editing in the comments below. It becomes a really good resource that way. And please give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. That's it. I'm going. Bye. See you next Sunday.